Are you ready for a dose of Harris doomerism? Sure. Michael from Pennsylvania. Hit my line. What's happening?
Well, you know, I think I'm in the dissenting seat for this community, and for the people who've been on here before.
Not
But
really. I think
Harris,
there's a lot of people in my community that think like
Okay.
Trump is definitely a lock. I would say more people probably in this community think Trump is a lock than even myself. I have brought forward people to make a convincing case as to why Kamala Harris still has a shot. I still think there is a likelihood that Kamala Harris will win, but that likelihood is so fucking small now that it's a massive toss up. Like I'm not talking about like the way that the media has covered this issue. I just wanted to hear like the most doomer analysis from you as someone who is in Pennsylvania, who has worked in Pennsylvania local politics. Like I think I value your analysis, especially on that front. And, I have brought forward a broad variety of different opinions on the matter, but I want to hear what your argument is as to why Kamala Harris is going to get fucking absolutely cooked.
Well, the first thing that I would say is it's a combination of a lot of factors. Is like one of the like theories that I've been pushing for like most of my political career is that like all politics is national now. Like our local politics is becoming less and less and less relevant, and states are starting to look more like each other, especially those that are close to them. And the thing about Pennsylvania is, and this is also similar in Nevada, where basically what we're seeing so far, and I think early voting is like the realm of charlatans, like the people that talk about early voting and like, oh, we know this is going to happen because of this. You don't really know what the contents of the vote are. At the most, you have like registration and whatnot. But one thing we can look at is people of a certain registration and what their propensity to vote is, and which group of people have been showing up at higher rates than others. And the reason why I'm very doomer on Harris is we've seen like a lot of like evidence is that the turnout among low propensity Democrats is way down, and the turnout among low propensity Republicans is up in a similar to like 2020, except we don't have the COVID mail-in ballot like a turnout boost. So that we're seeing a differential turnout for the Republican leaners are higher than the Democratic leaners. This is very true in like Nevada. I think Republicans have an outright turnout advantage, which they did not have in 2020.
Yeah.
Like they're up by a lot. In Pennsylvania, I think we have like the Democrats up by like around 300,000 net, and they need to be at least 500,000 like to win statewide. So she's way behind like where she needs to be. And then also like with Pennsylvania registration, there's been a continual like shift of people from Democrat to Republican, like a significant number more. I think it's like 80,000 more people registered Republican than Democrat over the last year. It might even be more. I'd have to look it up again. But that's kind of my main thrust is like, and it kind of tracks with my own vibes, which is why I kind of lend it a little bit of credence, which is it's 2 weeks before the election. What am I doing? Like, what is the internet political discussion? It's not people like all unifying around Harris. Like it was in 2020. I don't know about, I don't know if you guys remember back then, but like my community and your community, we were all kind of like pushing for Biden. Like we were saying,
no, I voted for Joseph Robin and Brandon.
And we were like, yeah, vote for him. We got to get Trump out of there. And we were laughing over Trump getting sick from COVID a week before the election and being like, look at this idiot. When he did that stupid mask ripoff and he looked really weak and everybody was like, he had to get helicoptered to, just the whole vibe was a lot different than now, which is we're engaged in infighting. Like the left of the party is under attack. It's a vote shaming thing. It's worse than 2016. There's a lot of young people that are not seeing anything like about Gaza to give them any hope. As far as like she's campaigning with the Cheneys, the progressive wing has been completely abandoned. I think you saw that Nation article from the interns at the Nation.
Yeah.
I don't think that is just a bubble. I think that is a sense that's like out there that,
so
don't vote for her because of the genocide.
Are you ready for this? Like, I think that, not to get all Nate Cohn over here, but I think that if like what I'm looking at right now is what the Democratic Party has very openly communicated. They're saying they have a pathway to victory that does not revolve around people who care about American foreign policy, people who care about Israel and Gaza, and young voters that they are relying on. They believe that those are firmly planted, that like there is going to be enough turnout from the youth vote that makes up for, the Philadelphia, like there's going to be enough black and brown and young Philadelphians that are voting in urban areas. And then that the real problem here is to just like decouple former Republicans or never Trump Republicans away from Donald Trump and just get them to go out and vote. It's very clear that we both agree that that's their strategy, right? Like that's precisely what they're doing. They are gambling with their regular constituencies and their propensity to turn out because they are taking it for granted and they are hyper focusing on a couple key targeted swing districts, a couple key suburbs, basically, where there are college educated white voters who have either, logged themselves as independents and have fucking voted for Donald Trump twice or at least once. And they are trying to get those guys to come out and vote for the Democratic Party. Now,
I just think that has absolutely no chance of working because, like, I think a lot of people take large swaths of the electorate for granted, and that's not how people operate. I have this. This is something I showed before, but I just popping it on my camera real quick.
Yeah.
But basically, tell me how interested you are in this election using scale 1 to 10. This is the lowest it's been for black voters and young voters, like going back to 2004.
Oh no, I remember looking at this data as well. Yes, this is very, very important. I totally agree with you.
Disastrous for the Democrats. Like, there's really no way to make that up with like swinging somebody who's a like suburban voter. And there's been $200 million spent in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, so
that's this election cycle, and the numbers are bad. Like they're not. She's like she's well behind like previous Democratic candidates at this point in the race.
So that's the real problem here that I have been screaming about for months at this point is that like obviously the message that you are presenting is unsuccessful if you've dumped $200 million into communicating that message in every fucking ad possible and the polls have not even shifted, right? Or worse, shifted in Trump's favor. So clearly the message isn't working. Now, of course, they're too fucking late at this point. It's too late for them to just like all of a sudden communicate a very different message. And I think that like ultimately it's leaving it on it's a coin toss. Like it's leaving it up to a leading it up to a very dangerous gamble that like Philadelphia urban voters are going to turn out no matter what because they're worried about Roe v. Wade. They're worried about like Trump being a fascist, and they're going to do the lesser evil voting. They're going to do the harm reduction voting in enough numbers that they can fucking cling on to a couple of these suburban voters. Which, by the way, polls have shown that method is unsuccessful. That's the craziest part about this. I guess like in general polls, it shows that Kamala Harris is leading. Or is leading on Biden in terms of like white college educated voters. I have seen that. Like, she has maintained a strong presence in white college educated voters. It just matters. It's entirely dependent on where those white college educated voters are. If they're not in Pennsylvania, she's fucking cooked. Because
I think the thing for me is like, first of all, she hasn't given people a reason to believe she should be trusted with the presidency. Like at the end of the day, they reject Joe Biden, and her mission should have been show a vision for the country that would have been different than Joe Biden, a change election. And the reason why that was necessary is there was a Franklin and Marshall poll that just came out. I can link it to you if you want. But basically it goes through all this stuff. This is in Pennsylvania, and it's disastrous. It's fucking disastrous. Like
is it the legislative session? Shapiro insults protesters. No.
Here, I linked it to you. I linked it in chat. No,
link it in the Discord chat.
Oh yeah. That's old as fuck.
Yeah.
Here, I'll link it to you.
Oh, I got it. I found it. Okay.
Yeah.
Dear readers, okay.
If you scroll down, and the thing that really shocks me is the last time Pennsylvania residents thought their finances had been better than 1 year ago was October 2020.
Yeah, I see that. So
basically, for the entire time Biden has been president, people have been saying, no, my finances are worse off than a year ago. And like that, you can't ignore that. And like Kamala Harris did. And she just basically said, I wouldn't have done anything different than Biden. And that's the message people got. And as that's the message has gotten out, her momentum ended. It stalled completely.
Do you think, and this is crazy because like voters originally said that they weren't going to punish Kamala with Biden's economy.
She hugged him.
She had a blank slate when the swap out first occurred, which was crazy. It was like, I remember looking at polls being like, that's what a gift. What a gift to the Kamala Harris campaign.
This is something like when she first dropped out, I know you and I were like completely open to her. And I feel like that was a sign, we were representative in our communities of like the larger youth progressive wing of the parties where we were like, okay. And then when Walz was picked, we were like, okay. And like we were all chomping at the bit, ready to, jump on, become K-hivers. And the reality is, she went into the DNC. She made that disastrous right-wing speech. Ezra Klein of the New York Times, he did an analysis of it, and he said it was the most right-wing Democratic nomination speech he'd ever heard.
Yeah,
and it was
yeah.
And that's when the momentum stopped, and all the momentum she was seeing, all the movement in the polls that got her ahead of Trump was young people, was progressives coming home, was and a lot of people think of this like ideology in a totally wrong way. They think of like if somebody says they're moderate, it means they're a neoliberal centrist. And that's not what it is. It's more of a statement of your own like persona or your own like feelings about like
time and time again ballot measures. Time and time again, ballot measures have consistently proven that the most popular thing in the heartland, in the Midwest, in the Sun Belt, no matter where you go, is a lifeless, faceless, progressive ballot measure not associated with a Democrat directly. Americans love voting for instituting full-blown communism in the form of a progressive ballot measure, but fucking despise the Democrats or despise the Republicans as well, depending on where you're looking at. So, yes, the idea that like the average independent moderate who fancies themselves to be in directly the center of all of these issues is a silly one. And ironically enough, that's why I was excited about the Tim Walz prospect, because I thought that would actually force the Democratic Party's hand into putting forward or at least defending a progressive message, because right. Tim Walz, with a one-person majority in the state Senate in Minnesota, actually signed into law many of these measures that were considered radical by the Republican Party and maybe even radical by some in the Democratic coalition.
Well, here's the thing that's really interesting about that is notice how none of the attacks on Tim Walz were about the policies he passed in Minnesota.
Yeah. It was about fucking how he has a fake dog or how he abuses his son or all this shit. Exactly. They originally laughed and were like, oh, what a stupid mistake that they went with radical Tim Walz. He's a communist. And none of that shit actually worked even a little bit. But the problem is the Democrats actually fucking moved away from that. And it's very frustrating, especially when you have one of your most popular policies in a sea of boring neoliberal bullshit be that you are going to tackle price gougers at the federal level with pre-existing law that already is out there.
Has is the most popular thing.
Yes, and it's very frustrating that they are not. It's very frustrating that they're not fucking. They didn't push that hard enough. Even though Donald Trump kept saying that's like Venezuela. And the only thing that happened to that policy was that it grew in popularity in that process. It literally became more popular despite the New York Times op-eds about fucking how, this is impossible to implement and Kamala is just doing this or Republicans consistently attacking it. Yeah, the moderate voters are all over the ideological map. You want to explain this to people?
So basically, I popped up from my camera. Basically,
go
this
ahead.
is a
I'm gonna go
study
pee while
from
you explain this. I know I've heard this a million times, but let's hear it.
This is a study from a few years ago, but it still holds true overwhelmingly. Like, so this is a basically a political, compass with tilted on the edge. So like the top and the left squares are like the left wing economics positions, and then being more pro immigration is the bottom and the left. Okay. So what you'll see, and these are people who call themselves moderates, and they were all given an ideological test. And one of the things you'll find really interesting about here is the overwhelming majority of people who consider themselves moderate are very left wing. And then the 2/3 to like 70% of people are left wing economically. Almost no one is a libertarian who considers themselves. So like libertarian square is the bottom square. There's almost no one there. And actually, there are some people who call themselves moderate who are extremely right wing, but it's very rare. So basically, when you're running on, when you see people saying like, oh, a lot of people are moderate, but that actually that's a label that's not connected to ideology. It's not like a lot of people are Joe Manchin. That's just not the case. And so that we've known this for a very, very long time, that self-described ideology doesn't describe what people support. And we can have real world tests of this. Like, for example, in Florida, over 60% of people voted to restore felon voting rights. Over 60% of people voted for a $15 minimum wage. At the same time, Donald Trump was winning by like 8 points. They were getting 60% for the $50. So people are not voting for these candidates as ideological like decisions. It's a lot different than that. And so when Kamala Harris goes to the right on these issues, what she's actually doing is not really winning over a population that exists. The people that are like, I love Liz Cheney, are not real. The people that love Liz Cheney are actually liberals who appreciate her shitting on Trump.
Yes.
So these are anti-Trump liberals, and they see a Republican spitting in Trump's face, and they like that. It's not like a moderate Republican who loves Liz Cheney.
She does not have. I mean, Nikki Haley. Nikki Haley is the greatest example of this. Nikki Haley is the perfect example of this. Nikki Haley ran against Donald Trump. Nikki Haley said, whoever swaps their candidate first wins this election. Okay, but when it was Biden versus Trump, Nikki Haley literally is pro-Trump. She's voting for Trump. Nikki Haley voters are also voting for Trump. A lot of Nikki Haley voters in open primaries were actually Democrats who also either registered for the Republican Party to vote for Nikki Haley, or are also, going to end up, if they were Republicans, are going to end up voting for Donald Trump. Going after this Nikki Haley constituency is so fucking stupid. And that's precisely what the Democratic Party has done. Now, here's the other side of the equation. And this is why I think that Trump's chances are not great, regardless. Trump, what would you say to the argument that like Trump is maxed out on support? Would you agree with that assessment? That he is like...
No, probably not. Just because like we've seen him significantly get more popular in kind of a nostalgic way. Because like if you look at, I would say that like he does have kind of a ceiling near 50%, but it is high enough that he can win. So you know what I mean? Like and if you look at his like approval rating, like his favorability has improved significantly from 2016.
Yeah, that's
true. He's actually in the most favorable he's ever been. People think of his presidency as relatively more successful than Biden's. And, they don't really hold the COVID thing against him. Like, you know what I mean? And I don't think people really hold COVID against Biden either. They just hold the inflation against Biden. And whereas with Trump, they think of like the pre-inflation, low interest rate growth period, right?
Mike is right. That's
just the way
Trump,
it is.
Mike is right.
That's the way it is.
Trump has never been this popular in any of the elections that he has run. This is the most popular he has been at this stage in the election. That is objectively correct. Okay.
Now he's not he's not popular. Like he's still net negative.
Yes. That's what I'm saying. This is the most popular he has ever been while running in an election. Okay. Elections that he's won, election that he lost, doesn't matter. This is the most popular he has ever been. In terms of the electoral support, I believe this is the highest he has had as well in the polls.
Yeah.
Like,
no, he's never been better in the polls.
Yes.
In the 3 elections, like the polls right now, Trump has never been better. Never.
Yes. So
like for me, that's the kind of thing that I look at where I do like a sanity check. Like, okay, is it possible that the polls are wrong and that Harris is like could win? The answer is yes. I think whenever you're looking at polls from a scientific perspective, you should look at that and recognize they have a margin of error and it's possible. And then when we start to think about like, okay, historically, why did the polls get it wrong? Why were they underestimating Trump in both 2016 and 2020? And the answer is a certain type of low propensity Republican voter turning out and being hard to poll. And the question I keep asking myself is, does it seem like with the evidence available that those people are showing up again? And does Kamala Harris have a commensurate like rise in low propensity Democrat voters?
Hold on. Or where they're showing up. That's important too. I think that like my argument or my vibe overall on this is that there is a very high likelihood that Trump can win. I still think Kamala Harris is like I put her
she's an underdog at this point.
I put Kamala Harris like marginally in a better shot than Donald Trump, because I do think that the polls, at least pollsters from what I have seen, have slammed at least 2 points in Trump's favor in an effort not to repeat the mistakes of 2016. And even Trump overperformed the polls in 2020 as well, not to the same degree, but like he obviously overperformed polls in 2016. And he also overperformed the polls in 2020 as well.
He actually
so this time I think pollsters are like literally fucking slamming 2 points no matter what.
It's interesting you say that. It's interesting you say that because like he did overperform the polls more in 2020 than he did in 2016. He was just further behind Biden in the polls. So like the polls had Biden up like 8. He ends up winning by 3. Well, that's a 5-point error, but he was so far ahead in the polls that he still won, right? Whereas in 2016, Hillary was up, 3 or 4 in the polls, and then she ends up losing the close states. So she loses, and the polls were wrong like by 2 points, right? So the 2 points were more relevant because of where they were, like how the numbers were looking. But 2020 was actually worse. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, have the pollsters figured out how to poll the electorate that supports Donald Trump in general elections correctly? And I don't think we can know that until the actual election happens, which is why I have if I thought that they had done that, then I would say the polls are accurate. But the reason I think, if you're betting, to me, I think that it's much more likely that they got it wrong again, because it's very hard to like get these people.
Yeah, no, it's notoriously difficult, which is why I think they're just straight slamming 2 extra points. That's what I'm saying.
I don't see any evidence that they're just doing that shy Trump adjustment. Like, so it's funny you mentioned this, because back in 2015, when Jeremy Corbyn was running for the first time as the nominee for Labor in a general election, and the polls were all very much in favor of the Tories because they had this shy Tory weighting on it. And I was one of those people that looked into it and said, oh no, I think Corbyn's going to massively overperform. And he ended up he almost won the election outright. But there was a massive polling error against the Tories in 2015 because of that shy Tory weighting that was being applied. I don't think I see any shy Republican weighting being applied.
No, I don't think it's shy Republicans. I don't think it's a matter of shy Republicans. I think it's a matter of like it not being able to predict low and mid propensity voters accurately. So they're just like throwing that on the board. Like they're just weighing it in that direction so that they don't come short again. That's what I think is going on, because I don't think no Trump supporter is shy at this point. Okay, there's no.
That's what I.
Yeah, they're loud as fuck. Okay, they love Donald Trump. They love saying they love Donald Trump. They're calling him daddy. They're fucking insane over there. I don't think it's the shy.
Saying spank me. Yeah. I know.
Yeah, I don't think it's the shy Trump voters necessarily. I think it's more so like, how many of the fucking crackhead constituency that like, how many of the podcasters, like podcast watchers, divorced dads galore, are actually going to turn out on election day and go out and vote because they're legitimately fucking, they're They think Kamala Harris is a Marxist or whatever the fuck they believe.
Well, I mean, I think the place to look, like, you know about the Nevada, you know, like Ralston, right?
Yeah. That's
So
not looking good for the Democrats.
He's been covering it pretty. So this is not Pennsylvania, so I don't know. I mean, I lived in Nevada for a bit, but I don't know it as well as Pennsylvania. But what I understand is like they're massively underperforming like ever before. Like in the early voting, like the Democrats are actually less turning out in early vote, and that's like never before happened because of the Reid machine. And one of the things that was really interesting is a GOP operative, and this is quoting from Ralston, Jeremy Hughes said that the problem for Democrats comes up when we look at the low propensity voters. GOP 204 voters. So when you say somebody's 204, you're talking about the last general elections, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a 204, you're a low propensity voter. Means you've missed two of the last 4 general elections. We consider that low propensity. Anybody below 3 of 4 is low propensity voter, right? So of the 2 of 4 voters, they have 25.3% turnout among GOP. Of Dem 204, it's 20.9% turnout so far. So
I mean, but that tracks. That literally is like represented in the national data as well. That's like the assessment is that
that means Harris loses.
Yeah,
that would be terrible.
So that is precisely the reason why I've been like, that is what I foresee as like possibly being Kamala Harris's demise, is that low and mid propensity voters do turn out specifically in the states that Kamala Harris needs to win. And Kamala Harris actually hemorrhages enough of her base, like the reliable votes that she normally gets from urban areas, younger voters, black and brown voters, and hyper focuses far too much on the Republicans in the suburbs, which have proven to be ineffective with all of the communications she's put out so far, and it doesn't carry her across the finish line. Like I'm on that. I understand that completely. I've been screaming about it for months. I just I still think that I still think that there is a pathway to victory.
I mean, she could win, but like, you know, as I said, because polls can always be wrong. You know, you could have a polling error against her. I have a theory of the case for her if you want to hear it later, but I'm not very confident in it. And the reason why is because like one of the things that was really interesting in this data that I saw is that the GOP is winning among new voters and voters who have never voted before. Like of people that are registered Republican but who have never voted before, they have 17.8% turnout for the GOP right now in the early vote, and among Dem voters, it's 13.9%. So that's like so like people that are newly registered are turning out at a much higher rate if they register as a Republican. Thus far, you know, this is early voting. We got to wait till all the way to election day. I do think that there tends to be an advantage of non-college educated voters the closer you get turning up, which I think Nevada, like I always thought Nevada would probably be held by the Democrats, but because they have such a weak Senate candidate, but I don't know. Like, I'm not trying to doom too hard. I'm concerned that, though, this might actually be like a Trump popular vote win just based on these numbers that we're seeing. And that would be absolutely cooked. And I think the evidence is strong enough there to be concerned about that.
You don't think that there's a Trump popular vote victory where he still loses the Electoral College, though?
That would only happen if she managed to hold Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And I think any election path that requires Michigan to be held by Harris is very suspect. I think people really are underestimating the damage that has been done by Gaza because they don't want to deal with it until it actually happens. They're like in denial about it. They're like, no, they won't vote for the Muslim ban guy. And they just kind of turn off their brain and they don't look into the data at all. And if you look at I think Biden won by, how much did he win Michigan by, chat? I was going to say 80,000, but I don't remember.
I think it was 100,000.
Okay, 100,000. Like there are, you know, like what, 300,000 Arabs and Muslim voters in Michigan? Like,
Yeah, and I think they voted for Biden by like
70%.
Yeah, 70.
Yeah. So that's like that, and that's the entire gap. I mean, I guess it's possible. I mean, the path would be that she does move the numbers among white voters closer to, like, she does even better than Biden does with white voters overall. I find that hard to believe. I legitimately find that like almost unbelievable. The idea that Joe Biden would do worse with white voters than Harris would do.
I think that the math comes down to white women. Like, I think that's what it comes down to. Like, are white women finally not going to vote for Trump as the majority? And I don't know where that is right now. But I think if Kamala Harris secures white women as the majority voting bloc, then she has a chance of winning the election. The problem, however, is that when you look at Arizona polling, where abortion is on the ballot, when you look at Florida polling, where abortion is also on the ballot, well, I guess Florida is a unique case in and of itself.
Florida is like, I think the Republicans are up 10 in the early vote right now.
Yeah, Florida doesn't like, make any sense. It doesn't matter, now. but like
that's crazy.
In midterms, and in other special elections, like obviously abortion being on the ballot has greatly favored the Democratic Party in terms of turnout. In the general election, it's a little bit different than midterms. It's a little bit different than it's obviously very different than like special elections. I think that like not Florida, but Arizona as an example is more important to see if like this kind of additional turnout specifically on abortion, does that allow Kamala Harris a benefit, an electoral boost? And I think that for a lot of white women in red states, I do not know if they will be able to shake off white supremacy as being their primary motivator here, where they can very selfishly go, yeah, I want to protect abortion, and also I'm not going to punish the guy who took it away from me and my daughters, and then turn around and still vote for Donald Trump gladly.
I feel like one of the problems that we have is that the Democratic Party hasn't like drawn those lines, like, because they want to do this thing where they like kiss Republican ass, but they don't want to, like 95% of Republicans are going to vote for Trump. And Democrats don't deal with that, like that problem. Like they don't go to the voters and say the Republicans are Trump supporters, and Trump supporters are wrong. They're scared to say that. Yeah. Whereas on the other side, the Republicans are like, these are criminals over there. All Democrats should go to hell, and that creates a certain like distance from the consequences of the Republican Party's policies. She doesn't want to attack the Supreme Court. Like, remember, she was on that town hall and she was asked about the Supreme Court getting expanded, and she said we should study it. Well,
oh my God. Oh, that was so bad.
They already studied it. Biden did an executive order in 2001. They published a report, like, I think it was even early this year, about studying the Supreme Court reform. And they came up with the idea of like term limits or something. And so she's basically just running on studying it again.
Yeah, no, she has concepts of a plan. That's her concepts of a plan shit. Like Kamala Harris is like she always does this. She used to do this in 2019. We used to make fun of it, where she would be like, we're going to begin to start thinking about the steps that we must take in the future as a prospect arises. It's like, what the fuck are you saying? Like, that's not an answer. You're just dancing around the fucking issue.
And I think the reason why it's bad is a number of things. First of all, it keeps the Republican Party like free and clear from the consequences of their policies, like on abortion, overturning abortion. The second thing is it doesn't give Democrats, it doesn't like force Democratic politicians to take public positions on court reform. So even if she does win and we do get a trifecta, we're not getting court reform because they didn't prepare the party for it. They didn't make it, they didn't run on it. So they're not going to suddenly like come and do this big radical reformation, so it's not possible to reform it. And then the Democratic base voters are not equipped with the knowledge of knowing who's to blame. So regular people aren't going to figure that out either. So you're kind of like expecting people to be like super educated about, who's to blame for who in 30 years of Supreme Court precedent in history, but also not blame Harris for not having a clear plan. So people are supposed to be educated, not want a plan to fix it, but then ignore the fact that there's no plan. It is an incoherence. and this is a problem with Harris, is she wasn't challenged in a primary. She wasn't forced to like come out and make promises and give concessions to various groups to win a primary election that are in the Democratic Party and kind of shore up her base. Yeah. And so she's kind of just like assumed the base is there, and now she's going to the right, and there's a big problems with the base. And the turnout and the vibe is down because of, the genocide is clearly one. She said, fuck you to everybody to the left of Attila Hun. She's holding hands with Dick Cheney. And like, it's not that these people are going to vote for Trump. They're just not going to show up.
Yeah, no, that's my
theory of the case.
No, okay. So we're in agreement there. I'm like, I don't disagree with what you're saying. I don't even think she's done enough fear mongering against Donald Trump, which is kind of crazy to say. Like, I don't think that she has actively communicated what
she agrees with his immigration policy. Except for
that's the major issue. That is exactly the major issue here. Like, one of the things that has made me so angry in the way that the Democratic Party has presented immigration as like they are going to be the border, they're going to be the border party, is so fucking stupid. Not because you're making a concession that like immigrants constitute a national security threat, which is unique in the history of the Democratic Party, at least in contemporary history. This is a unique thing that the Democratic Party has given ground to. Okay. And that makes voters in your own base go, wait, what the fuck? Okay. So I guess we're for the border wall. All right. Well, the other guy has been pro border wall always. And you just now look like a flip flopper. But beyond that, I think that it is a terrible place to it's a terrible way to communicate a winning message, because now you can't even bring up how Donald Trump is an extremist on the fucking border. They are genuinely, I think, fearful that if they bring up Donald Trump's insane anti-immigrant policies as a massive problem, because they saw that one fucking poll that said like 60% want mass deportations, they're now stuck with this idea that like if we tell people that that's going to happen, like that people are going to run in and set up concentration camps once Trump is president, that everyone's going to go, oh, I love that.
Well, first
and they're not even actively communicating how fucking devastating that will look like for the humanity of these supposedly 20 million people that have been living in your fucking neighborhoods, that work at jobs that you don't see, that you take for granted, but then also the economic issues that come along with that as well. Like all of these, a litany of problems, and they're not actively separating themselves and positioning themselves against the Republican Party's policies on the matter by simply saying, oh, they're ineffective. They're not effective enough to be the immigrant mutilator party. We will be the immigrant destroyer party. It's very stupid.
Well, I think the main thing is, first of all, they never care what issue polls say. Okay, like, 70% of people support a public option for healthcare. They're not running on it. Why not? I mean, because they don't care. They don't care to run on things that are popular. They are that has nothing to do with what they're trying to do. So why are they doing this like right-wing immigration ploy? It's the same thing that Obama tried. He was the porter in chief. They tried this whole strategy of run to the right and then we'll compromise with the Republicans. Biden tried it. He said, we'll do Trump's immigration policy. And they said, fuck you. We want mass deportations on top of it, And the main issue that we have here is that the Democratic Party is too far right. And they created this immigration disaster because they maintained Trump's policies on Cuba and Venezuela, where they did economic sanctions and they destroyed these economies, and they sent millions of refugees to the United States to flee these situations that are created by our foreign policy. And Joe Biden is a psychopath, warmonger, neocon on foreign policy. And so he likes it. He wants to have Venezuela's economy destroyed. He wants Cuba's economy destroyed,
for sure.
And he doesn't want to pursue the like they had a trifecta. They could have pursued some sort of policy, but again, he loves the filibuster. So these disasters exist, and they exist because of the policies that the Democratic Party supported, and now there are consequences for supporting it. And the solution that they've come up with is adopt Donald Trump's 2016 campaign. There's no way that people who are racist against immigrants are going to choose Kamala Harris over Donald Trump, no matter what Kamala Harris says. If Kamala Harris set up a death camp for immigrants, they would still vote for Trump over her. So what is she even? What is the point of this?
Yeah,
and it kind of tells you that their main goal is not really these policies. It's more of a kind of shaping the electorate in the way that they only want to win a certain way, right? They only want to win with this kind of neoliberal interventionist, American hegemonic version of the Democratic Party. They don't want to win with like a FDR. Like FDR ran on the good neighbor policy, which is we don't interfere with you.
Yeah.
That was that was
the Waltz message as well. It's like you don't, we're not gonna. That was such a banger message on both abortion, trans issues, everything. You could just like slap that on and be like, why the fuck is the government interfering with a medical professional and the decisions that a healthcare professional is making with a fucking patient? Like, it's not up to us. It's up to the professionals. Like, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about.
And the same thing with the trans issue. Like, they've been running scared from it, and it turns out it's a fucking dud. And when Kamala Harris is given the right to go up there and you could easily spin the trans message into an abortion message as well. Yeah, because it's bodily autonomy.
Yeah,
and
no, it's the same principle. But that's the other thing.
They don't even try.
But that's the other thing. So, Mike, that is part of the reason why I think that there is still a slight marginal victory for Kamala Harris here, is that the Republicans have very stupidly hyper focused on like duds. They are doing the reverse of what the Democrats are doing, ironically enough, by hyper focusing on idiotic shit like the trans issue. Donald Trump's response to how he's going to solve the economy, while he still polls better because Americans remember a time when Trump was president and think fondly of that time and think that they were doing better. That's the only thing carrying him on the issue of the economy. Donald Trump has demonstrably not presented anything that is even remotely resembling like a path forward on how to fix the economy. And not only that, but also has so personally invested in the anti-trans shit that I think people at least look at Kamala Harris and go, all right, well, she's going to expand on some of the things that Biden did, or she's going to do maybe price gouging. I don't fully understand it, but like, she says she's going to expand Medicare to at-home healthcare. Like, I think those are the reasons as to why, if you look at the polls, if you look at like the way that people are viewing Kamala Harris on the economy, she's actually picked up some points on that front in comparison to where Joe Biden was.
Oh, true.
Now, she could be far ahead depending on how she had communicated her future forward, right, from the start. But I do think that is one of the major players here, that like the Republicans are also throwing the election right now as hard as they fucking can by slamming hundreds of millions of dollars in ads on trans issues in a country where 64% of the population is like, I think trans people are discriminated against. Like, I don't really give a fuck. Like, I don't really fucking care. Who cares? This is weird as fuck to hyper focus on.
I do think the Republicans are very weak on their campaign as well, but because it's a very odd campaign, because Trump has already been president, and we've never had in our lifetime a situation where you have an incumbent president running for election where it's not immediately adjacent to his current term. You know what I mean? Like, the gapper situation causes this thing where people have enough. It's been, long enough that nostalgia could kind of kick in, and the problems of then are not exigent anymore, and now it's the problems of today. I
think that's also a communication flaw
for him.
No, but I also think it's a communication flaw from the Democrats, not reminding people of what it was like when their fucking grandparents were dying with a ventilator in their fucking throat because they believed Donald Trump's lies about COVID, is like a perfect way to remind people in a way that Democrats like, because it's like not even an issue, right? You're just talking about the misinformation, the hateful bigotry, and the annoying arrogance of these fucking idiots in the Trump coalition. But they can't do that either, because then you're being mean to Republicans, and you can't be mean to Republicans while simultaneously trying to win Republican votes.
Well, that's the thing. It's important to remind people of like what they hated about Trump, but but also to offer them something different. You know, like you don't want to just remind people that they can avoid the ads by subscribing at the top of the hour. You want to give them the opportunity to also use their primes. You know, they don't just have
son of a bitch, dude. God damn. I bring you on and you betray me like this. You steal my fucking...
It is the top of the hour, and the best way to avoid the ads is to subscribe.
That's bullshit. I mean,
I don't know if you guys know this, but tier 3s are actually the single best way to support a streamer because they count for more. Like if you spend the same amount of money on a tier 3, it counts for 6 sub points, as opposed to 5 if you were to gift 5 subs. So the best thing to do, tier 3. I mean, obviously. Then you get the extra emotes. It's great.
Yeah.
Anyway, what was I saying? Oh, reminding people of how bad it was with Trump.
Yeah.
I think that the main reason they failed to do that is because they don't really have a vision of their own. You know, when Walz came in and he had that list of policies that we talked about that he had passed, if they had just kind of adopted that as a quick, like, you know, progressive campaign, that's a moderate left policies. Nothing on there was like crazy left wing.
Yeah,
you know,
no.
It wasn't Medicare for all or anything. It was like paid family leave and, you know, we'll protect trans people and, you know, people will be able to, you know, take time off to have a kid. Like a family oriented, very very popular policies that have 65+% support. And say compare that to Donald Trump and the fear that people felt about losing a job or whatever. And they just don't want to do that because they don't want to make promises. It's just that simple. They don't want to make any promises.
Yeah, but I don't even fully understand why they don't do that. It feels like they just don't want to win. Like everybody lies. Trump lies all the time. Just fucking lie.
That's actually something that I've been saying for a long time. Give me some lies I can sell.
Yeah,
like, I don't want to be anti-Kamala. I don't know about you, but I don't want to be anti-Kamala. I don't want to, you know, say I can't support genocide, Holocaust, Harris. That's not what I want to be doing. I would love to be able to go out there and say she's going to be a peace candidate and she's going to get us $50 minimum wage and she's going to pass the PRO Act and she's going to pass the Equality Act and she's going to do all these great things, but she refuses to campaign on anything. So she leaves me with the fact that she's doing a genocide in Gaza. And she's going to implement Donald Trump's fucking immigration bill. And if she gets into power, she's going to spend 4 years doing what? Primarying Greg Cesar. She's going to spend 4 years with AIPAC trying to pick off every member of the squad. She's going to be doing what? Working with Oklahoma senators to set up death camps for immigrants. Like, what is her plan? And like, she's given me nothing but to say to abstain. And that's where I'm at mentally and with my vote right now is I can't endorse a candidate who is saying thousands of children dying in Gaza is immaterial to your life.
It seems like you were not captivated by $50,000 in tax cuts for startups in an opportunity
I'm starting a new
economy.
business every year, baby. Oh my God.
In an opportunity economy, it's quite frustrating.
I will be taking advantage of that. I'll have a merch business 1 year. I'll be spinning off, I'll start a gaming stream. Mike from PA Gaming will start. I will have, there will be an IRL Mike channel. I'll have like 8 fucking Twitch channels.
So
I'll have 8 $50,000 tax breaks. It'll be fucking
I'll have
great.
you know, Kamala Harris is prosecuted transnational gangs.
That's the only time she's ever going to say trans. Like, if you're ever expecting her to say anything positive about trans.
I'll have you know, Kamala Harris has prosecuted transnational gangs and also prosecuted transnational small businesses. Okay? She is a small business. She loves small businesses. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that's bad here. I don't think it's there is no like very clear pathway to victory here. I simply look at polls which are even more, I feel like even more unreliable than they ever have been. There's obviously junk polls that like greatly favor Donald Trump that almost feel like messaging polls in general where they're just like, yeah, no, Trump is up fucking +4 or whatever. Beyond that, I think that like it's still it basically comes down to like the most reputable polls. They're very close. and they still have like a marginal victory for Kamala Harris over Donald Trump in the states that she needs to win. I wanted to hear before I let you go, like why you are saying that it's definitely locked. Pennsylvania is definitely gone.
I don't think that is. I actually think that Pennsylvania will probably be one of the closest states. The reason, like my main thought comes to two things. A, the way like the momentum of the polls have all been narrowing. Like all the last like Pennsylvania polls have pretty much been tied or Trump advantaged, and there's maybe like one or two that have Kamala like with a very narrow lead. And when we look at the early vote, let me see if I have this. I have this somewhere. Give me 1 second. If you look at the early vote in Pennsylvania right now, I think Kamala Harris, like the Democrats are up 300,000 ballots in their ballot return, and they need to have about a 500,000 vote firewall because the electoral day turnout is always pro-Trump.
Austin is in the chat correcting you. He said 377,000.
Thank you. Thank you, Austin. Where did you get that?
He's saying.
Where the hell did you get that?
He is. I'm gonna be really honest with you. He is so locked in on poll watch, like it's
That's
crazy.
Amazing, Austin. Thank you.
No, he hasn't.
I was just looking at it.
He is
just looking at it right now.
He's losing sleep every day. He's like losing his mind with fears that Donald Trump is going to win. And
I mean, like Philadelphia turnout was below Pittsburgh turnout for a while there, which is crazy because Philadelphia is like significantly bigger than Pittsburgh. So like that, ladies and gentlemen, is bad. It shows that the polling, okay, so yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the applications, and even right now, the Democrats only have a 504,000 applicant lead, and they would basically need like every single person. I'm looking at the numbers right now. So there's 1,985,329 like vote by mail and absentee ballot requests total, and the Democrats have 1.1 million of those.
Okay, Mike, this is not an ambush at all.
Do you want to debate me? Come on.
Would you want to talk to Austin as well? Austin, would you come on? Would you want to get on the call, Austin, to counter some of?
Absolutely, come debate me, Austin. Everybody,
it's not
come
like a debate. It's not a debate. This is like we're all like-minded individuals.
I don't want this to happen, but I'm really pissed at him.
Who are all trying to hold on. I'm gonna add people into the DM group real quick. I'm gonna add Austin into it.
Bring him in.
We're all trying to make sense of what the fuck's going on, and no one here wants Donald Trump to win, for the record. I know, contrary to popular opinion, contrary to what like naysayers might say, Austin, turn your camera on. Turn your camera on.
Hold on, I don't know what's behind me. Hold on.
You don't know where your camera is?
No,
okay.
No, I'm on my laptop. Hold on.
Listen, I'm not trying to. Listen, I know that my position is not going to be popular among a left-leaning community just because it is what it is. But
I think it's. Look, I'm kind of here on the like. I'm in the. I'm of the mindset, Mike, that like I'm not gonna ambush you and be like, you're wrong, she's gonna win. Like that's insane. Like I'm not one of these insane liberals that's like Kamala is gonna like clean house, all the polls are wrong. Like it's a toss-up. At the end of the day, it's a toss-up. I don't think we should feel good. Now, where I do disagree with you is the presentation that the data that you're pulling from the early vote is indicative of her like for sure losing.
No. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I said.
That's the way. That's the way. To me, it's presented. Is that
what I said was I think Pennsylvania will be the closest election, and they need about a 500,000 vote firewall. Right. And they have it. They're in the mid 300s right now. And I was looking at the Pennsylvania Secretary of State website, and I was looking at that, and I was like, even from the requests alone, they're not going to get that. So it's going to be like less than 10,000 votes is what I'm saying.
Where is this? So one thing I wanted to know or ask you is Why people keep tagging me in Hoscord and I can't fucking turn off my fucking notifications?
Go to D&D. Go to
Hold on,
Do
how
Not
do I
Disturb.
How do I go to streamer mode? People
You
keep
fucking boomer!
You want me to switch to my PC?
You're a professional fucking streamer. How do you fuck this
No,
up?
I'm not. No, I'm not. Hold on. I gotta order.
I don't
want to
wait. No, you're cooking. Just put it on Do Not Disturb mode.
I don't know how to do that. Hold on. Just give me a second.
I think it's literally in your bottom left corner on your fucking thing next to your profile picture. Click on that.
Settings. Okay, do not disturb. Invisible. Do not disturb. Okay, cool.
Do not disturb. Yeah.
All right. My question to you, Mike, is
mm-hmm.
Number one, where's this magical 500,000 number? Because I've heard it too. So I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying
basically it's a ratio. It's a ratio thing. We're kind of making some assumptions, like because we expect the day of vote to be heavily Trump. So
yes. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
And the reason why that is because that's just been the pattern that we've seen. Now,
yeah, like what, 2020 and 2022 a little bit, not as much.
So what's weird about Pennsylvania is we really didn't vote by mail much before 2020. So like there's the before 2020 Pennsylvania electoral period and there's the post 2020.
Right.
And the pre 2020 there was basically no vote by mail. You only had to do excused absentee ballots, meaning you had to have a legal excuse to even vote by mail. You couldn't just request one. Right. You had to like swear you weren't going to be at your, voting precinct on the election day.
Sure,
and so we don't have very many cases to rely on. We're really going by some very wide assumptions.
Yeah, okay.
And
go ahead.
So what I'm saying is the uncertainty is high.
Yes, of course. I think we both agree on that. I think we both agree that the uncertainty is high. So to say things
these are very good questions, Austin, by the way.
Yeah,
no one else would even ask these.
I mean,
that's a man who interviewed Bernard Sanders recently.
The other thing that I think is important to say, because I do think you do a disservice by not sharing this information, and it only goes to your point. There's a lot of unknowns, right? But there is data to support that the GOP has made a significant investment in the last 4 years to bolster their early vote, right? So what you're seeing a lot of right now across a lot of the swing states for the GOP is the Republicans are performing better in the early vote, as you would expect with that type of investment.
So you're saying cannibalization. You're saying that they're cannibalizing what would have been day of votes.
And I'm not saying this is all that's going to happen, but and look, you can say it's copium, but it's reality. They are cannibalizing day of votes.
I don't think it's cope. I think it's a reasonable argument.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying that it's again. But we're all in the same camp here. We don't know what's going to happen, but I think this is information that people should have because it is true, and it's something important to look at.
So the main piece of data that I have to like counter that point is just like when we look at the polls, they start to have like, now that we're really close to the election, they ask you, have you voted yet? Right. Mm-hmm. And so you have like the early vote section of the poll, and then you have the people that are going to vote. And we see in the like are planning on voting in the future a big Trump advantage still. Now I'd have to like really drill down and look at that to see if we could definitively say. But what I would say overall is just like looking at what we have available to us today, a combination of like our vibes, the data, the total data, like what Kamala Harris needs to be at to be assured of win. She's not in that zone. She's in the Donald Trump can win zone.
I mean, for sure.
That's where we're at. Yeah. And I'm more doomer than other people because I just personally think that her mistakes are so big.
Yeah, well, and I agree with you. By the way, for the record, I'm sitting here nodding my head. I think all of like the campaign has been an absolute disaster. So
it started out strong. It started out really strong, and it's really gotten bad. And I really am disappointed by that.
It's frustrating, but we all agree that like the campaign has been a fucking disaster. I'm just saying that where I think I'm not as doomer as you are. And the other thing is that like I don't know where I found this stat, but in 2020, I think what we're all making this assumption because we all paid very close attention to the 2020 race, right? And Republican day of voting, where Republicans like show up and vote on the same day, was like R plus 30, right? In 2022, that fell from like R plus 30 to like an R plus 10. Because in 2022, obviously, it's
but Trump, is a midterm, and Trump wasn't in there. And also, we know.
Oh my God. It's an important data set to look at because it does mean something. It may not like be something that you can extrapolate into the main election.
You can extrapolate it. It is already extrapolated. It's that Kamala's leading on high propensity voters.
I could talk about this if you want. So like just very quickly, we have a high propensity versus low propensity. What we've seen is a shift that's been very unusual. Like for almost the entire political history, the Republicans were the party of higher propensity voters, meaning lower turnout election equals higher likelihood of Republican winning.
Rich voters, rich wealthier voters.
Yeah, because like the more educated you are, the more money you make, which are not always linked, but in general they are. They're not totally though. The more likely you are to vote. So like people who make $1 million a year, they have a 99.9% turnout rate. So so the richer you are, the more you vote. And so historically that was always advantageous for Republicans, lower turnout, special elections, midterms, Republican advantage. But with Trump, there's been kind of like a declassification of the parties, like where we're no longer, we don't, how much money you make doesn't tell what party you are anymore. Whereas before it used to be wealthier equals Republican. Now it's not the case. And so what we're seeing is like, and I describe it as like upscale voters, like, or class conscious voters or status conscious voters are more Democrat. And then you have like, I don't know, white trashy or trashy people that would think, who own a F-350, they're not poor, right? But they have a certain, like, they have a trashy aesthetic. They have truck nuts. That's not a poor person thing. That's just like an aesthetic thing, right? And so we're seeing that. And with Trump, he does really well with these low propensity voters that are conservative.
Yes.
And so in the midterms, now that we have those high propensity voters, those teachers' pets voters are going Democrat because they don't like the way that Trump makes them look. They don't like the way that he makes the country look, and they're voting as like a status thing against Trump. That means Democrats are going to do way better in midterms and way better in specials than they did before. Now we have the general election for the president. This is the highest turnout election. So the question of who is performing better with the low propensity voters of their side. And I think that it's very, at least in my opinion, very clear that Donald Trump is doing much better with the low propensity Republican conservative type than Kamala Harris is with like the young college student.
And the data you have is from, and I think you use this, you draw this conclusion from the data that you have in Nevada. And I saw that exact same data point.
I think, no, the other one was, it's another thing I posted from a couple of days ago. I mean, all of this data requires you to kind of have like a mental model, right? And then, we all try to make our best case for it.
Yeah, I have a question because genuinely, because I think like all of us, you guys are experienced professional political commentators. I'm a guy that tunes in every 4 years to look at Twitter.
Oh, you tune in all the time. Don't start.
But my point is, I've got a question. I've looked at this. To what degree is this Target Early, Target Smart website? To what degree is this like providing accurate data?
Well, first of all, Target Smart is great. They're a great company. I've used them myself. In fact, and basically what they do is they try to link stuff with voter files. And they try to do like I bought them for digital advertising and campaigns before, but basically what they do is they try to line up like you buy ads for people that are like in your district and like you could like target them and you could they're micro targeting shit. I like Target Smart. They're great. Why?
Okay.
Which data are you looking at?
Well, I've been looking at data specifically. Look, Pennsylvania, admittedly, of all the blue wall states, the Republicans are performing the best in the early vote, right? According to Target Smart.
Wisconsin's not looking too good either.
Or Nevada.
Wait. Why is Wisconsin not looking too good?
Where are you seeing this? This is interesting. I never saw this before.
According to Modeled Party, and I don't know that's why I asked how accurate it was. But according to Modeled Party on Target Smart, if you go to the state, you go to Wisconsin, by percentage, the Democrats are slightly overperforming by percentage their early turnout by percentage of the total electorate.
Do you have a link to this so I can take a look at what you're talking about?
Slightly overperforming their here, let me show you. they're slightly overperforming their 2020 at this point with 12 days to go by percentage of the current like voting electorate. And Republicans are underperforming by like half. Like at this point in 2020, Republicans had made up of actually more than Democrats, 43.4% of the electorate with 11 days to go. And now today they make up 21.9% of the electorate. The biggest change in the electorate is the independent unaffiliated category at 41.8% of the electorate.
I gotta look at this one. This is a little odd. I mean,
that's what I said. Well, that's what I was wondering. It's like, to what degree is this Wisconsin?
I wouldn't be surprised if like one piece of data was a little bit off. That's interesting. So
that's what I was like. Look, if you look at Wisconsin, by
do you
these
know what these do you know what these modeled parties things are? In case
I have no idea.
curious?
That's why
okay,
I was
so
asking, like, what does that mean?
So basically, the DNC has its data that they usually use this thing called VAN, right? Mm-hmm. And in DNC, they have access to these Democratic Party voter files. Mm-hmm. And they have like statisticians and things that put together these models, and they integrate like all sorts of data that these campaigns have collected over the years with like big data information. Like, you know, are you subscribed to Men's Health? Are you subscribed to, you know, who fucking knows? You know, you have all sorts of products that you've bought and institutions and organizations that you're memberships of, you know, and they create these models based on each voter, and they have a personalized voter score. Right? So that's what they're doing, is they're taking people that have like returned their ballot, and that's publicly available information, and they're linking it with the Democratic Party's like modeled score of your partisanship. And we all have two scores. The first score is our voter propensity score, that's 0 from 100, and then we have a voter partisanship score, 0 to 100. And so they're trying to see, you know, if you have like above an 80 or whatever, that you're like a Democrat for sure, right? And that, I think, is what they're doing with modeled party, because it's not like your registration per se. It's like what their scores say that you are.
So, okay.
So what's happening here is like...
They don't report by registration in Wisconsin or Michigan. So the model is doing it.
Is that true? Is that true? I don't know enough about those states.
No, Wisconsin, they don't report by registered party. So we don't know exactly. So I'm just looking off.
That makes sense with the unaffiliated number then. That means there's some sort of issue with the model where it's like it's not able scoring to people as Republican. You know what I mean? They're scoring a lot more people as
is this an assumption that we make, or that, you know, that's what I'm saying. You know, like, are we making this assumption? Because if you look at the state of Wisconsin based on, I'm not trying to debate you here, but just based on Target Smart, something that you said to be very,
I think they're good. I mean, I don't know.
Right? It is showing in Michigan, or also if you go tab over to Michigan. At this point in 2022 or 2020, with 11 days to go in the election, the Democrats are outperforming themselves. Like, from at this point in 2020, they were 41% of the electorate. In 2024, this model says they're 52.2%. The Republicans are underperforming at this point with 11 days to go at 37.7%. Of the electorate.
So I mean,
by this model, now I don't know how reliable this particular model is, but that's just what it says. And I'm not. This is just where I'm going to find my information. So
yeah,
to your point, I agree with you and how the Harris administration is handled from a policy standpoint. I'm not disagreeing with any of what you guys say with how the administration has handled themselves, or the campaign has handled themselves. Like, I think they've done a terrible job. I'm just looking at the raw data, and I'm asking for what you make of this.
So what I would say is, like, I would say that any state that doesn't report by registration and is doing a modeled party thing, and they have like big changes and like 10% plus, that doesn't track. So like, there is something going on with the model where you can't like use it. It doesn't make sense that like the unaffiliated would jump by 10% like that, and the Republican would drop by 10%. You know what I mean? That's not possible. Like, if you go to like,
but you're seeing, hold on, but in Pennsylvania with registered party, you are seeing a 10% jump by Republicans in early voting.
Yeah, that would be bad, right? Like that makes
not necessarily. because we talked about the GOP's investment, and it makes sense why Republicans are performing better in the early vote. That's what I'm trying to say. It makes sense. It tracks. I'm not saying this is a good thing. I'm not saying that she's going to win. I'm just saying, based on what we know, I think a lot of us remember 2020. 2020, we were in a global pandemic. The voting patterns are going to be completely different in this election. And I know 2022
not completely.
No, I mean, it's universal mail and universal registration is a pretty significant driver of turnout.
Definitely. Like it was much easier to turn people out in 2020 than it is now, right? Like, especially in Pennsylvania. So like, here's the thing about these models. This reminds me of 2016 very much, because when in 2016 I was working in Northampton County, which is like the swing county. It's one of these what we call pivot counties. They voted for Obama twice, and then they voted for Trump in 2016. Yeah. And I was there in 2016, and we were doing some GOTV work with Hillary Clinton's models. And we were going and knocking at people's doors and expecting them to be strong Hillary supporters, Sure. So they were like Democrat partisan, but their propensity was lower. So we were trying to make sure that this Democrat actually went out and voted this time, right? Okay. Which is a key turnout goal. Is if people like could agree with you but not show up, or they could like definitely show up but not agree with you. So you want to change, you want to persuade those people, and you want to make the people that agree with you show up. That's the goal of a campaign, right? In a nutshell. And we were finding way too many Trump supporters. We were finding like, oh, this data is totally off. Why are we running into so many people that we think are Democrats that are Republican? And the answer was they didn't do normal campaign field work, where you try to contact people ahead of time, and then like they say, I pledge to vote for Hillary, and then you mark them down as a Hillary supporter, and then later, when the election is happening, you come and turn them out in GOTV that would get out the vote, right? And so because they skipped and they just used models, they were mistargeting a ton. So whenever I see a modeled score and it's like a very important part of anybody's like mental strategy of like what's going to happen, I'm very skeptical of it. It's not that it's wrong. It's just I don't find it plausible that there would be such a huge shift. And when I look at like the PA on Target Smart, when they have those like registrations, I'm seeing like 65% of 2020 model party Democrat, 1 million, right? And then 64% model party Democrat, 727,000. That tracks to me. What I mean by that is like, we're not seeing a 2020 turnout. We're seeing a significant drop of 30% of the number of people that are voting by mail, because everybody was voting by mail in the pandemic. And a slight drop off in enthusiasm, right? So instead of 65%, we're seeing 64. And, it also makes sense with the story you were telling me about how much money was invested with Republicans. A lot more Republicans are turning out. So that tracks, right? So you have 376,000 of Republicans voting early. And in 2020, it was 429,000, which is shocking because like a lot more people are voting by mail in 2020. The fact that the Republicans are nearly at 2020 levels in the vote by mail, that means they're ahead of the curve of what you would expect. The Democrats are down 30% in the count, and the Republicans are only down by like 5% in the count. That's a concerning fact. Now, the copium is they're cannibalizing. That's the hopium. That could be true. We will only know that on election night. Unfortunately, all we have to go by is the polling, which shows 48-48, right?
Sure. I mean, yes. Like I said, I know 2022 is a high propensity voter. Is it high propensity
high turnout election 2020?
2022. I'm sorry, the midterms.
Oh yeah, the midterms.
In the midterms, you saw a lot of these mail-in voters switch to election day. Is what I'm saying. So
you think the Republicans won't have as much of an advantage on election day?
No. I think they're going to have an advantage, but it will not be what we saw in 2020. And I think everybody has this expectation that Republicans are going to show up with a 30-point advantage on election day. And that's why they look at the early voting numbers and they're like, holy fuck, she's going to get killed. But if it's I know 2022 is a midterm, but a lot of Democrats shifted to election day voting. Look, I'm not saying she's going to win. What I'm saying is the data isn't as bad as it looks, because like we are all stuck.
I agree with you, by the way. I firmly agree with you. I think that early voting data you have to take with a gigantic grain of salt. Like you shouldn't use it as your primary argument. I think the main argument for Kamala Harris losing is just the polling averages are bad, you know, and it's hard to poll those low propensity Trump voters.
For sure.
Yeah, you know what I mean? That's the main argument for her losing. It's not the early voting data.
I more have Hassan's perspective on the polling, which I agree with you that voter is hard to poll, but polling is all over the fucking place. I mean, pull up some of these polls and look at like the demos of some of these polls. I saw a poll where like Trump was winning 55% of the it was a poll that everybody was freaking out about. They're like, oh my God, Trump's ahead by this much in this particular swing state. And you pull the tabs and it's like 55, Trump's winning 55% of the women vote. They're all over the place. They're all over the place because they don't want to be wrong. They don't want to make the mistakes that they made in 2020. They don't want to make the mistakes that they made in 2016. So I actually think that you should take polling with a grain of salt. They're all.
I agree with you. I think the main thing that you can say right now is it's a toss up. It's the most toss up of toss ups.
Yes.
But the reason why I tend to lean toward the more doomer aspect of it is just the intangibles and all the vibes and like they're down for Democrats. That's for me.
Can I say some truth that I think people may disagree with it? Look, she's run a terrible campagn. Like she's run an awful campaign, in my opinion.
I think she's done some right things, and then she's also failed.
In many ways, she doesn't. Be based on a lot of factors, she doesn't deserve to win in the eyes of this community. And so a lot of people there isn't a lot of copium in this chat. A lot of people think she's going to lose, and people want her. Like I don't even know if they want her to lose, but they want to feel vindicated by that fact. Right?
I 100% agree with you that we are more likely to want her to lose.
I'm not saying that they're wrong for that. I'm not saying anybody's wrong for that. However, what I'm saying is there is no, like, even when I present like things that are fact that in the data, call it copium, hopium, whatever you want, it's shoved away in this community because people refuse to accept the fact that she could possibly still win.
No, I think that anybody.
Okay. First of all, I want to clarify. I have maintained the position that Kamala Harris, especially a couple months ago, was going to win.
I know you have, but a lot of people here, Hassan, every time I presented something that is very true. The GOP made a huge effort to get out the vote, get out the early vote, to reverse their earlier strategy of like calling it voter fraud. They have done that, and they're seeing success. They saw a little bit more in 2022 and even more in 2024. So you would expect their share of vote to be more representative in the early vote, and that's happening. But like when you present that as like, oh, that doesn't necessarily mean that she's getting her ass kicked when you compare it to 2020 based on these factors, people just like brush it aside and be like, oh, bullshit, cope.
No,
you know what I mean?
I think your argument is actually this is actually a major source of concern, definitely for the right, because they stupidly were like, oh, don't vote by mail, it's all a scam. That was very stupid and ill-considered. Like in Arizona, for example, Republicans had been the people who had an edge in vote by mail for many, 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 many years, many, many cycles. Arizona used to be like kind of like the white Republican would vote by mail. And now when Trump kind of like did his whole thing about, oh, don't vote by mail, that's very stupid, because when somebody votes by mail, you can bank them early and you can call them up and they'll say, oh, yeah, I already voted for you and I sent my mail-in ballot already. And then you can go and see, did that actually happen? And you can, were they an absentee ballot requester? Did they return it? That's usually available information for a campaign. So you can like literally start counting your votes, and you have a model of the election, and you have what we call a win number, right? In a campaign, everybody has a win number, which is the number of votes they believe they're going to need to hit in order to win, 50% plus one, right? And that is what every campaign is trying to do, is find that win number and deliver that win number through a combination of their field organizers and their field campaign and their paid canvassing and everything they're doing to try to get to that number. And I don't think you're wrong to point to the fact that the Republicans have changed course on here. I think that's actually a really good point, that you can't just say what happened in 2020 is going to happen again. You can't do that. That's fucking stupid.
Right.
I think the main reason why I'm more skeptical of this is it's just like, I think the problems with polling are still around, and like, because of the compositional change of the Democratic Party toward these higher propensity, more likely to respond to polling demographics, if there's a polling error, it seems to me more likely than not that it would be against Trump than for Trump. You know what I mean? Like these, you know, the lower propensity white voters, they're not the ones picking up the phone and saying how, you know, they're not sitting there for 35 fucking questions. You know what I mean? Like, and there have some changes have been made to try to capture those people, but that's kind of the problem that I see is when the election is this tight.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
You know,
they have
it's
to.
Not good for her.
Pollsters have to make a decision. They have to guess what the electorate composition will be. And then they'll take that and they'll go do polls. Like they'll go poll that percentage of the Democrat. They at a certain point they have to guess. And historically, they've been wrong in 2020 and 2016 with the general election. So, I mean, there's reason to believe that they are overcorrecting here, but we'll see. Who knows? God knows.
So your belief is that there's kind of a systemic bias against the Democrats in the pollsters, and that they are modeling they're like. So here's the thing. Can we talk about likely voters for a second? So like how that actually works. So there's like two different methods of doing it. You have like a hard likely voter screen and what we call a soft likely voter screen, right? And the hard is basically looking at, does this person vote? Do they have a track record of voting? And only talking to those people. And then the other side is a soft likely voter screen is this person registered to vote? Yes. And then you ask them, how likely are you to vote? And if they don't say extremely likely or certain to vote, they get kicked out. So like it's to be a likely voter is a very high bar for a polling. Like, you know, they're kicking out a lot of people that are going to vote. Like, so that's, and I know this because I've purchased like 5 different polls myself. Like I've gone through with these questions of like, how are we going to model it? Are we going to, you know, the things that you're talking about, like what electoral map do we have? And the reality is when you do a polling with the raw data, you're not going to get the same, like the correct proportions of what the demographics of the electorate actually are. See what I mean? Like if I call 1,000 voters, I'm not going to get the same ratio of each demographic group and each, you know, in perfect alignment. I have to make some changes. Which means I have to, and I'm not going to throw out responses. Let's say I get twice as many educated white men as I need. I'm not going to throw the responses out. I'm just going to weight each one of them by 50%. That's how these polls work. And so, you know, that's why we have these big error bars.